Hi, everybody. Is this okay? Can you hear me? Is there feedback? No? Great. All right, so where are the slides?
Ben, hold on 1 second. We're waiting for your slides to start.
They're everywhere. Wow.
Everywhere. So Ben's going to see his slides back there, and then you'll see his slides. I guess we're going to first.
Do we see the slides? Yeah. The first 30 seconds of mine are gone with this. Actually, I have a black slide first. I don't know if that helps or hurts. I don't know the sponsors. Oh, wow. Hey, okay. So the sponsors are, oh, crap. The sponsors went away. No, that's not my first slide.
Is that now your first slide?
It shouldn't be. This is still me, though. Hey, I'm Ben Scofield. I'm at B Scofield. I don't know when my first slide will appear, so I'm not going to talk about that. I'm going to talk about the color black, which is lovely and goes with almost everything. There we go. Yeah. Okay. Hi, I'm Ben Scofield. I'm going to talk about the concept, the practice, and sort of alternatives to mastery. And I think this is a really interesting topic because it seems like you can't really go anywhere without getting slapped in the face with somebody talking about this or somebody doing it. Right? And when I say it's everywhere, I really mean it's everywhere. Right? You go to the bookstore, you look in the business section, there's a half a dozen books, face out saying, hey, talent is great, expertise is wonderful. You go to psychology, you go to science, there's research. The concept has sort of permeated our culture in a way that few others have. My personal experience with mastery started a couple years ago when I read a book by a guy named George Leonard. He's a martial artist who practices Aikido, and he's taught and practiced it for about 20 years when he wrote this book in the 80s. He sort of distilled a lot of his life lessons down into principles and concepts that he thought were the most appropriate. But really, the writing about mastery didn't stop with him. Malcolm Gladwell, he of the amazing afro that looks a little deflated here, but is still really cool. He wrote a book called Outliers that a lot of you have probably seen. There's a guy named Jeff Colvin, a couple others who have written other books on talent and expertise. And it's like a cottage industry, right? You can go to the library and find 20 or 30 books written in the last 10 years on this topic. And what they're all getting at is something that really has permeated our culture. You can see it when you turn on the television, right? You got shows like Leverage and White Collar and Burn Notice and even MacGyver, right? They're all about us watching people be the best that they possibly can be. They're better at what they do than anybody else is. No, okay, so I say it's permeated the entertainment industry, but we also have this weird anti-mastery undercurrent with shows like Chuck, where a guy gets a computer downloaded in his brain and all of a sudden he can do stuff, but he didn't put in the time. And the Karate Kid, this is the new Karate Kid, right? Where you train with a wise handyman for a couple months and all of a sudden you can beat up kids who have been doing the same thing for years and years. And that's kind of misleading because mastery isn't about the quick fix, it's not about the training montage, it's about what you see at the Olympics when you watch Shaun White go down the half pipe and pull off stunts that no one has ever thought about, right? He's clearly the best person at what he does in the entire world. And that was a display of expertise, of mastery, whatever you want to call it. Mastery is not just in physical activities, though. We also talk about it in music with Beethoven, Bach, Mozart, Yo-Yo Ma. You could name a billion different musicians who we call masters. It also happens in less physical competitions like chess and other games. The root of mastery is it's a very diverse domain. There are a lot of skills to perform. Right? And that actually brings me back to martial arts for a minute, because one of my favorite quotes on all of this is from Bruce Lee. He said, "I don't fear the guy who's practiced 10,000 kicks one time. I fear the guy who's practiced one kick 10,000 times." So it's a very broad domain with 10,000 kicks, but he spent a lot of time focusing on just one skill, masters that, and then he moves on to the next. The other interesting thing about the quote is this number 10,000. Right? If you've read Outliers or heard people talk about it, Malcolm Gladwell talks about the 10,000-hour rule. And that's actually come out of the research on expertise and mastery, where it looks like no matter what your domain, on average, it's going to take you about 10,000 hours to reach that world-class mastery level. Now, I don't know about you guys, but I'm actually not a master of anything. I like to think I'm on the path for some stuff, but if you're the best in the world, there are relatively few of you. So we've got some other options, right? We've got mediocrity, we've got adequacy, and then down at the bottom we've got mastery. So let's talk about those. Mediocrity is kind of the default. I don't want to brag, but I'm a really mediocre chess player. I know the rules, I know how everything moves, I know enough to know that these are various strategies. I don't know enough to put them together to win very often. Right? On the other hand, I am adequate at a lot of things. And the difference between mediocrity and adequacy is when you're mediocre, you lose a lot, right? And you don't get better. When you're adequate, you win a lot because you're good enough, right? Most of us in the world are adequate at our jobs, otherwise we'd be fired. We're adequate at relationships, otherwise we'd be divorced, right? And it's a very complicated step from mediocrity to adequacy, but I think one of the big differences is adequacy is externally motivated, right? Your boss is going to fire you if you're not adequate at your job, right? With mastery, on the other hand, it's internally motivated. There's nothing chasing you to become a master at tennis, though you might be pushed onto the path early on by external forces like your parents forcing you to take piano lessons or tennis lessons, right? To stay on the path, it requires an internal drive that you just don't see in most cases. And the path actually is pretty simple, right? It looks pretty flat and straight. It's because there's only one thing you have to do. The technical term is deliberate practice. And I put it in scare quotes because it doesn't just mean to practice sort of deliberately and slowly or whatever. It's a very laden term. It means something specific. When you're practicing deliberately, you are reaching for something, you're performing, and you're trying to reach for something that is beyond your current skill. And then you fail, right? Because it's beyond your skill. And you fail again and again. And it's hard. It's not fun. It's waking up at 4 a.m., going to swim 100 laps while some fat guy yells at you about the mechanics of your stroke, right? It's hard. And that's sort of the root that makes the journey itself hard, because the only thing you're going to be doing on the way to mastery is deliberate practice. While it's not fun to do the practice, the rewards might be fun. You might win gold medals. You might, find lots of dates or whatever. But the actual practice is difficult, and you can't always do it alone. Sometimes you need a great coach like John Wooden or Dean Smith or Mike Krzyzewski, depending on your blood color. What coaches do is they bring an objective eye to your performance, so all those times you fail, they tell you what you did wrong, and then you can go back and repeat it. You try again, integrating their feedback, and you slowly get better, and you reach those levels that you failed at first, and you keep going. But remember the 10,000 hour rule, right? That's a lot of work. It's years and years of laborious effort, just repeated over and over. And so that's actually the route that I want to take you to take away from this. Right? Mastery's hard, and it's not required. Adequacy is good enough. So is there anything that you want to master? And if so, are you willing to undertake the journey? Thank you.